Thank you for joining me. My name is Jenna Fortinsky, and welcome to my podcast, Simply Jenna. I am a registered psychologist and owner of Simply Counseling Services, a private counseling group in Calgary, Alberta. In working with my clients, I have noticed that I offer something different. The difference is simplicity and balance. I want to share that with you using this platform. Join me as we discover together how to keep it simple.
Welcome to another and our newest episode of the Simply Jenna podcast.
So exciting.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
We've been very busy having some very interesting, unique, incredible conversations with folks through our Breaking the Stigma mini-series. So we're excited to be back and to provide you with another episode of our regularly scheduled programming.
Yes.
With the podcast. And this time, actually, it's a bit of a special one because we had the honor to chat with the marvelous, wonderful, fantastic Liane.
Yes. Yeah. So, so happy that she was able to join us for this topic of self-care and caregiver burnout. And so Liane, I had met Liane when I was working for Alberta Health Services prior to starting in private practice. And to say that Liane is a master of her craft, it just doesn't give enough credit to what she does. And she is just truly incredible at what she does. She's also a psychologist, and she is just somebody that has always stood out to me in terms of how good of a job she does and how much of a natural she is. So she truly has some unbelievable gifts. And we were so fortunate that she had agreed to join us for this conversation. It was an unbelievable conversation, and we're so excited for all of you to hear it.
Yes, definitely.
So without further ado, here we go.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Liane, for joining us for this episode. We're so excited to have you here.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. So what you do, where your hometown is, and maybe a fun fact.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I live on an acreage actually between Okotoks and High River, and probably for the last 23 years, I run a private practice. I am a psychologist. And in my private practice, I do a lot of individual, mostly family and couple work, which I really love because I get to do the direct work, which is really important to me. Yeah. As I've been working for Alberta Health Services for about 16 years now. Wow. As I would say probably the last 10, actually, no, it's more than that. It's about 12 years now that I've been working as a clinical supervisor. And currently I work at a hospital for in and outpatient services as a clinical supervisor. So I oversee the clinical work and do a lot of training. Lots of teamwork. And a fun fact about me probably my team struggles with it sometimes. I really enjoy change.
Okay.
And tend to be very experiential and kind of work on the fly.
Oh, yeah.
So quite adventurous, I would say. That's who I am.
Yeah. Which is great. But yes, always as an employee, you're always kind of nervous about that, right?
Yeah.
When you have somebody who's a team leader that is fun and outgoing. It makes you nervous sometimes, for sure.
Yeah.
And I just think it's fun.
Yeah.
Good girl. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yes.
So you're busy then, which is awesome. So good for you. Yeah. Okay. So today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about, obviously on our theme of breaking the stigma, but we're going to be focusing on the stigma around mental health for mental health professionals.
Yeah.
So we wanted to start out by talking about an understanding of this term around compassion fatigue or burnout. We hear a lot about burnout, and especially nowadays, it's very relevant for mental health professionals to be having this conversation about burnout and compassion fatigue. So can you define for us, what does that mean? What does compassion fatigue mean, or burnout?
When I think about that, I think most of us actually we're carers, right? So, that to me encompasses compassion. And I think that in particularly when I think back in my earlier years, for sure, more so when I was a novice, I really felt that, almost my calling was always to be a helper.
Right.
And I thought really being, helpful and, working with people was almost sort of jumping in to probably their world.
Okay.
And what I realized, though, is I was taking on a lot of that.
Right.
And probably not the most boundaried with it. And probably, again, because I was so new. So I think the fatigue in my earlier years would have been not being boundaried in that area.
Okay.
So I think that leads to burnout,
Yes.
just because, you're more exhausted. You go home with all these thoughts on your mind and, hoping that you could even do more. And then throughout, as I started understanding more and, learning how to be, I think, a better helper, I understood that there really had to be, more of a rather than jumping in, it was more of a walking with.
Okay.
And still understanding, where the person was coming from. So, and really relating, in lots of ways, but with having some objectivity.
Okay.
So I can understand how you would end up sort of maybe crossing that particular line.
Right. Yeah.
So it's something I continue to work on, but for sure in my first couple of years, it was something that I fell into for sure.
Definitely.
It's definitely an easy trap to fall into. I think for all new mental health professionals is, like Liane had said, this taking on of what we're hearing in session. And so it does lead to a quick sense of exhaustion and feeling like, you are living what you're talking about with these people. And so an important part of that, I think, as a professional is developing some sort of self-care routine. So what would you say, what's your definition, Liane, of what self-care is?
Yeah, and I run caregiver groups and often, we need to talk about self-care because that's really the foundation. That's your health and wellness, and everything really comes from that. I probably would have to say, though, that when I think of that question, it reminds me of earlier years. I think even just being a woman that one of the stigmas I think behind that is often that if you're taking care of self first, that maybe that's selfish in some way.
Totally.
And what I've realized is, that's taken, a while for me to even understand that it's really an unselfish act because, the more you're able to take care of yourself, really, truly, the more you have to give.
Yes.
Right.
And again, that's something I think you have to continually have to work at. But I also know that I am more efficient. I have more energy when I'm sort of filling up my cup first.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say that it's really instrumental in order to have the best, I think, emotional, physical, and mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting the role that that self-care can play and how much that can influence your as a woman, I guess specifically the many roles that you play, right?
Yeah.
So if you are in the mental health professional field, then you have a role there. If you are a mother, if you are a wife, if you are a sister, whatever your role is, so many of those roles are influenced by whether you practice self-care or not, right?
Absolutely. You have to fill yourself up. And if you don't, then you're going to be depleted and you really have nothing to give. Yeah. And I understand that on so many levels. And you're absolutely right. It's in all domains of your life, right? So, and I notice the difference in myself.
Yeah.
And others do too, because there's an inner strength that you have as you are taking care of self. And that's in all areas, spirituality for me and, physically being with nature and, eating well and just being with people is very energizing as you're taking care of self for sure. Yeah. And you have to role model that.
Yeah.
You have to walk the talk, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, like, especially in the media nowadays, is that there's kind of this pushback around, self-care is not having a bath, right? That there's so much more to self-care. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, Liane, about like what classifies something as self-care, because I think there's a lot of mixed messages in the media. Because I think that I would argue, even for myself, me having a bath is self-care for me. That is something that I do value, and it is important to me. You know, I own a business. I'm a mom. I'm a therapist, right? So for me, the bath really holds a high significance for me. But I'm noticing on social media and the messages we're getting around us that, you know, it should be more than that, or we should be aiming higher or better. What do you think about that, Liane?
I think it's really personal and it's really individual.
Yeah.
Like I've talked to, friends and things like that, for instance, that a bath for them, oh, no way.
Yeah.
It would be more of a shower. It's going for a jog. It's maybe it's even going for a nice dinner. There's lots of ways to do self-care. For me, I would say I love the hot bath, but now I have a hot tub.
Yes.
And
You've leveled up, Liane.
I know, and I love it. And it's an outdoor hot tub, and it's really nice and warm. It's at 104 degrees. I get to look at the sky, because we're on an acreage. I get to just feel all the peace in my head and everything, and I just love it. And for me, 15 to 20 minutes, I just feel so relaxed. And so for me, that's self-care. And actually, even a really nice dinner.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has their own way of doing self-care. And I think we just have to, and just mindfulness. A lot of people really are into meditation, yoga. I think whatever brings you a sense of peace and a sense of rest in your mind, I think that's what self-care is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification, because I do think that it's important that we advocate for people to really focus on what's important for them, themselves, right?
Yes.
And not to really focus on what everybody else is saying and what everybody else is doing. Is what makes you feel good and what makes you feel like you're filling your cup back up. And that's what's important, right?
Totally. So what happens then in the case where as mental health professionals, we get to the point where we maybe we haven't been practicing self-care. What does that look like? And how do you know when it's time to maybe get some help for yourself? What would that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I'll share some experience with that.
Okay.
And in particularly when I first got into my career, I remember wanting to just do so much and try to be the, there for everyone.
Yeah.
And, I remember feeling, it sort of sneaks up on you gradually, but I remember feeling like, I get home, I wasn't able to turn my mind off. I was thinking about sort of all the stories in my mind and my head and, could I have done this differently? Maybe the staff needs more support here. It was a residential program.
Right.
So there was a lot of high-risk teenagers and, families that I was working with. And then I wasn't, having problems with sleep, getting up in the morning, not feeling really rested, very irritable. And really almost having to be outside of myself in some ways, to be professional at work. And I think at that point in time, I didn't recognize it as quickly as I would have. I certainly would have recognized it a lot quicker now.
Right.
And then, but just knowing that, something's going on that's different, watching, a simple program or whatever, and then all of a sudden feeling, kind of tearful, maybe even a bit labile. And so knowing that I need supervision around that and, and being able to talk to my supervisor very openly, somebody very supportive, non-judgmental, and thinking that maybe I'm overextending myself, actually not maybe, knowing that I'm overextending myself, and then thinking I need to somehow, sort of back up and go, okay, what do I need to do now? Again, to revisit how I fill myself up. And perhaps maybe I might even need to access some support, more professional support even, as I'm working. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a stigma for us as counselors and therapists getting our own support? Do you think that there's a stigma around that?
You know, I think because I've been doing this for as long as I have, as well as part of my master's degree was you needed to do 12 sessions. Of half of it needed to be if you were in a relationship to do couple work, and the other 6 sessions needed to be family of origin work. However, I had prior to getting into this field, because I went back to school as a mature student, I had started working on my personal self and, my family of origin before that. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think there was less of a stigma for myself personally, just because I knew that it's really important that, number one, if I'm going to be working with people, that if I haven't been able to, if I really believe in what I'm doing, why wouldn't it also be good for me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I seen the value of it just personally before I even went back to school. And I thought, my goodness, if I could ever learn how to do this and to help, others the way I was helped, then to me, that would be a true gift.
Right.
So, however, what I realized, when I started working in the field, even just as a supervisor, asking or recognizing that, a colleague, or, somebody I was working with needed more support, I did see that there is a stigma. And that's sad, because I think that, we're doing a way better job at, deconstructing that, but I still think we have a long way to go. And just because you work as a therapist or any sort of field doesn't mean life isn't perfect. It will never be, and it's not supposed to be. And it can be messy, and we're human beings. And as human beings, we all, it doesn't matter what courses you take. Life is hard.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important that we understand that asking for help is such a strength. It takes so much courage. Mm-hmm. And I think you have so much more to give when you're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. I was watching the news recently. I think it was on one of the major news networks here in Canada. And they were talking about doing some research around this past year, because there has been a lot of focus with the pandemic and COVID-19 on doctors and nurses that have been in the front lines. And they had recognized that the mental health profession has not given, they haven't given as much attention to the mental health professions in terms of the impact it's had on us and for what we've been doing, because we've been having to navigate the pandemic as individuals, but then also supporting others in navigating the pandemic as well, right? And really trying to help other people navigate something that we don't understand and they don't understand, right? So I think they were doing some research around the impact that it's had on us as the mental health professionals and supporting that through this past year. Yeah. So it's nice to hear, I think, for me as a mental health professional, that they're starting to see that it is important for us to get our own support and for us to have good community and connection around us so that we're doing good work. And we're also getting our own support, right? Because the reality is nobody can do it alone, and nobody is capable of doing it alone. And, community is really where the healing happens, right? And that's what I've learned over my career as well, is having really good supports, right?
I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think that no different than any of us, I've never lived through a pandemic.
Yeah.
Although I'm a psychologist, this is all new to me, and it's new to my team. Yeah. It's new to the clients that I work with, and it impacts all of us.
Yes.
And I think that we have to have compassion, obviously with the people that we work with, but also I think for ourselves, this is new to us and this is hard. And I think there's going to be a lot to be said probably post-pandemic.
Yeah, right.
I know I'm very worried about just the pandemic that we're already noticing about mental health right now and addiction. It's high, and I appreciate that. I feel even with my role, the support to give to my team, I even have to do even more self-care because they're needing more support, and understandably so, because families are really, and just your own personal family is going through this. And I'm so empathetic and have so much compassion for families, that are losing jobs, and there's all this uncertainty, and teenagers, going to school, not going to school, young people that are now just been pulled out. There's just so much out there that I can just so empathize and have so much compassion, and just know that for sure we need to be able to be together and certainly be a community of support. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that that message of no one is immune to it, right?
Yeah,
that we're all experiencing the same thing. And I think that's so important. And, there is a sense of community around that, is that, we really can rely on each other, and we're all in this together, right? And I think that's an important part.
So hopefully we are starting to break the stigma a little bit then in having that conversation in the media or our mainstream media about how this is impacting, our mental health professionals, and maybe people are opening up a little bit more then to that conversation of practicing self-care and how important it is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good in a way that we can have that conversation now.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just wanted to say the reason I decided to be part of this podcast is I really needed to search within myself, and I practice a lot with vulnerability, and I felt that this is definitely being vulnerable.
Yes.
And I do want to break the stigma of mental health, and no different than it doesn't matter what I do. I also am impacted, and I see the value of reaching out. And I really encourage people to reach out. It's just such a sign of strength. And it is also a sign of that you're not alone.
Right.
And because sometimes you can sure feel alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I so understand that.
And especially in this pandemic,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like there is such a sense of loneliness out there, and it's so hard, right? Because people are stuck at home, and whether you've got a house full of people or not, that loneliness is there, right? And
I noticed, a shift from the first wave, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of families were sort of embracing being together,
Yes.
and, and working from home, which ones were able to and which ones weren't. And, but I think as it played itself out, I think I really noticed the impact in teenagers, in particularly for sure.
yeah,
The amount of, not going to school, and, gaming and addiction, and, even couples, together, lots of conflict, all that togetherness time. And even if you're both working from home and you don't have the space, people are feeling crowded.
Yep.
So it's got a huge impact, right?
Yeah.
So, but, so I get it
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Even personally, trust me.
absolutely.
In my own relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about self-care. Do you have any tips that you've learned through your years of practicing self-care? What kind of tips can you share with our listeners of what are some good ways to practice it? You mentioned a few at the beginning, but what other kind of insight do you have into making it part of your life?
I think probably the biggest insight I would have to that would be understanding, because when I think about my earlier beginnings, self-care would have been probably the last thing I would have seen my mom doing. It was always doing for, us children, her friends, she was always such a giving person. So I thought that was that you really didn't have time for self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest piece that I had to get through is that you actually don't have time not for self-care.
Okay.
Because what I've realized about taking care of myself, I actually have way more to give. And I'm much more clear. I've got more energy. I tend to be certainly, I would say, way more hopeful. I find that when you don't give yourself that self-care, I think you end up being somewhat, probably resentful.
Okay.
And you may not show that on the outside, but I think inwardly you start to feel like, wow, I just feel like I'm giving so much but I'm not really taking in anything either. And I'm the kind of person that really values being loving and caring and compassionate. And so I realized when I started practicing self-care and having really good boundaries that I was able to be way more loving, way more caring. And it enriched my relationships that much more.
Right.
So I actually even make more time now for self-care. And I notice the difference in my relationships for sure. And even with people that I work with, you can almost see this inner shine that they have.
Right.
They start showing up and you can just see that there's a bit of a bounce in their step. There's more optimism. There's just a light that they have. And I get it now. I so get it. And I don't think that, well, I know for sure I could never do this work without really paying attention to that's so important and so crucial. Yeah.
So do you think that that we should be practicing self-care all the time, or maybe only when we're starting to feel the burnout or compassion fatigue? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, now I just feel like that's every day. That's almost, for me, it's like taking breath.
Yeah.
If I was not practicing self-care every day, I just would feel that I absolutely would not be my best self. And I feel like I have a responsibility, not just to myself, but to, my team, the people that I work with, that I have such a privilege to work with. So it has to be, and you know what? I don't even think about it anymore. It was funny when I first started practicing it. It was like, you need to do this.
Yeah.
Now it just comes naturally.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just part of who I am now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think where I would have made the mistake earlier is what you just said was about, I think I had to get to the burnout.
Yeah.
Right.
And but I realized through going through, compassion fatigue, for certainly I would have called it burnout back then.
Yeah.
I realized that was really hard, but I needed to go through it just to understand how I needed to get in front of it next time.
Yeah.
And now self-care is part of who I am. I walk beside it, and I've learned to really love myself in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm able to love others much better now.
Yeah.
more caring for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because had a conversation on another one of our podcasts, where we were saying about how getting mental health help in general should be something that you practice, not just at the point of having struggles or issues. And this is same conversation, right?
Yes.
Like, it's important that even if you are a mental health professional, that if you are struggling, that you don't have to wait until you get to that point of a struggle, that it is important that you practice those self-care pieces before reaching that point, right? So we're hopefully sharing the same message that this is a critical step to take at any point in your journey, regardless of where you are in your life, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
And it's okay to just start today. Like,
Yes,
if this is not something you've heard of before, or you have previously thought that, you need to be in some sort of crisis mode or be at the end of your rope to start doing self-care. No, like, start today. Even if you've had the greatest day or the best day of your life, start today, right? Yes. Add a little cherry on top of self-care on top of the greatest day ever. Yeah. And just make it like what Liane had said, is part of your routine, part of what you do every day. It's almost second nature. It's the same as breathing. It's that self-care becomes a part of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, I know we've been talking specifically about mental health professionals in this episode, but would you say, Liane, in your opinion, is sort of getting to that level of practicing that self-care piece important just for mental health professionals, or do you think that it can go beyond that profession as well?
I think that compassion overall is quite innate. I think that we're all, hardwired for caring.
Right.
So doesn't matter what profession. I mean, I waitressed for 17 years,
Yeah.
prior to going back to school. And I think I know that self-care to me is the foundation. And I think that that it doesn't matter what you do. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not really your best self.
Right.
And so I think it goes across professions. I really do. And I think that, even though when I was waitressing, I remember caring too much for friends, like way too much.
Right,
and
yeah.
I remember taking on a lot
Yes,
and,
yeah.
almost becoming part of, not so much part of I remember taking a lot of their sadness and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And that again had a lot to do with probably me not feeling that I have value,
Right.
right? And so I think everything that we do, and doesn't matter what profession, if we can just remember that we're important too, and to make ourselves important enough to just do it. It doesn't take a long time. It doesn't take a lot of time, just even 30 minutes a day of doing something that you love. And that I remember somebody telling me they love knitting.
Right.
I'd love to learn how to knit. But I don't. But that brought this one person so much relaxation and so much peace. And I'm thinking 30 minutes, really, in a whole day, we need to make ourselves important enough to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter to me, every profession for sure.
Awesome.
Now, to say that with Liane's experience and knowledge, to ask you for one piece of advice to close this episode with feels like just doesn't feel right to me. So what are your closing thoughts, Liane? Like what, given the topic that we've talked about and where the world is today in terms of a pandemic and the role for us as mental health professionals and also for everybody else that has struggled throughout this past year. And also I think what we have ahead of us. What are your parting words? What do you want everybody to know? What's important for people to walk away with?
Wow. I think I'll back up to something you said actually, Jenna. And it was when you said about, it's sort of never too late to start with self-care. Like you can start today. I so agree with that. I have noticed, even when I run caregiver groups and, I have caregivers that come into the group, and you certainly can tell, like this was just a group I ran recently, and they had never really felt, most of the parents there had never felt that, they had time for self-care. They're teenagers and everything was more important, right? And when they started to do that, to me, today is a new day to start, anything that you can do to be kind to yourself, and just to really love yourself. I think the pandemic in lots of ways, when I think about it, I think it's revealed a lot of probably what wasn't working in the first place, actually. I think if we can take a look at some of those pieces, and for me anyways, and certainly for a lot of the people I work with, you certainly start to notice what's most important. Really connect back to your values. And really what's most important in the end is, your family, the people around you that you love and you care about. Those are the most important pieces of your life. And even through these times of, really difficult and, it's unpredictable and it's very uncertain, we can become resilient as long as we do this together to the best way we can, really to try to not be divisive and really to accept people where they're at, because everybody is at a different place. So really, really make, generous and kind thoughts about, the people that you're dealing with, because right now it's really hard and not everybody deals with stress really well. And so I think we have to be kind and, and understand that everybody is going through their own, stressors right now.
Yeah.
And really just learn to walk alongside and try to be the best support that we can.
Right.
Because in the end, that's what's most important.
Yeah.
And really that feeling that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because it sure can feel that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Liane, you are unbelievable. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you were willing to do this with us and to be a part of this. It really means a lot to us. And, you come with, like I said, a wealth of knowledge. So you'll definitely be back.
Yes.
You're going to be on, I'm sure, many a times.
We're already telling you that you'll be coming back.
Right?
Yeah.
I got to tell you, and I think I told you ladies first when I started, I'm really nervous. And I'm not a really nervous person. But this
You'd
is...
never know it.
Yeah.
You did amazing.
So the listeners know that I was anxious, but...
You'd never know it. You didn't have to say it. You could have stood in hiding.
That's right. But no, it was a fantastic conversation.
But I needed to be here. I needed to be here.
Yeah. And we so appreciate you, advocating for this, breaking the stigma, and especially for mental health professionals, because it is so important. That, we have a big job on our shoulders.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, for everybody also to realize that we do have a big job on our shoulders, right? That us as professionals, yes, we have a lot of undertaking, but for everybody else to notice that too, right? And I think a beautiful message, like Liane had stated, is that, for us to all be kind to each other and for us all to realize that we're all struggling. We are all in this together. So nobody is alone. So please reach out. Please take the time to advocate for yourself. And even if it is just one phone call or one email or one text, it can be very small just to get the ball rolling. So thank you, Liane.
Yes, thank you.
My goodness.
Thank you.
So we would like Liane to close this episode with a quote that she's chosen.
Okay. I have two quotes, but I love Brene Brown. I'm just going to let everybody know that right now. And anybody who knows me knows that. And one of her quotes that I really love is talk to yourself like you would someone you love. Or like talk to yourself like you would your best friend. It's honestly a lot harder when you actually practice it yourself. Yeah. And I find that it really helps you to be really kind and accepting and loving and forgiving of yourself. And another one I actually had just come across today, actually before the podcast. And I apologize, I don't know who actually quoted this. It might be unknown, actually. An empty lantern provides no light. Self-care is the fuel that allows your light to shine brightly. And I think what I need to say about that with the groups that I've ran over the years, especially with my caregivers, I can see them walk into the room and it feels as if they've got a glimmer in their eyes. And as they leave and are able to take care of themselves and just feel like they've really truly filled their own cup, there's a light that I can't even explain, but it's like a glow that happens over them and their eyes just start to shine. And so that quote really resonated with me. Absolutely. And I just encourage all our listeners to just do something really nice for yourself every day and just know that you give back tenfold when you do something nice for yourself. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liane. Thank you for listening to this episode. I wanted to share some important information before we let you go. While this podcast will give you strategies to use in your life, it is certainly not a replacement for attending therapy or seeking your own support. There will always be limits to what we can do on our own when it comes to mental health. And while we can give you tools and strategies, we know that they will not always work for everyone. There is value in telling your story and being heard. If you have tried the strategies we discussed and you're still feeling stuck, please reach out to us at Simply Counseling Services. Visit our website at www.simplycounselingservices.com for the services we offer and to learn about the other services that are free. You can also submit your topic ideas for this podcast on this website as well. Thank you again for joining us, and we are looking forward to our next time together. Take care of yourself.